Title: North Tennessee Butcher. The story begins in an apartment where 5 friends, Ryan, Luke, James, Sarah, and their sober friend Mark, are drinking and partying. Mark had purchased tickets for the last night, and the friends are excited about their upcoming trip to Camp Star Lake. As they get into their old van, Mark starts driving. After 2 hours on the road, they arrive at a nearby town before heading to the campsite. There, they meet the local sheriff, who warns them about the dangers of the area. He shares unsettling news. 10 people have gone missing at Camp Star Lake, and their bodies were found in the woods by one of the camp counselors. Despite the sheriff's warnings, the friends laugh it off and continue on their way. Upon reaching the campsite, Ryan steps out of the car but inadvertently steps into a bear trap. He screams in agony, calling for help. The camp counselors rush to his aid and help him out of the trap, bringing him inside the cabin to lay him down in bed. Camp counselor Amy apologizes, explaining that there have been many bear traps popping up everywhere, but assures them it wasn't their doing. Someone else is responsible. Meanwhile, James and Sarah venture down a path, joking and laughing, completely oblivious to the lurking danger. The butcher stalks them from the trees, disappearing like a ghost into the shadows. When James and Sarah return to the campsite, they find Mark sitting on a stump, writing in his journal. James approaches Mark and jokes with him, eliciting a laugh. As the group gathers, Mark remains at the stump, focused on his writing. He eventually walks toward the path where Sarah and James had come from. Suddenly, he hears a twig snap and crouches behind a fallen tree. Peeking out, he sees a rat caught in a snare and a man approaching. The man pulls the rat off the snare and starts eating it. Mark's expression turns to horror as he witnesses this grotesque act. He quickly backs away and rejoins the others without mentioning what he saw. Later that night, the friends gather around the campfire. James sings and plays his guitar, while the others join in, completely unaware that the butcher is stalking them from the trees. With his papier-mâché mask covered in blood, he watches them intently. After a moment, he looks down at the blood-stained ground, takes a sample, and then walks away. Act 2. It's a sunny day, birds chirping, and all the friends are asleep except for Mark. He sits on the deck of the cabin, contemplating what he saw yesterday. Amy wakes up and sits beside Mark. They start talking for a little while until they hear a twig snap. They both stand up, looking over in that direction. They see the butcher, but they don't know who he is. The butcher retreats, and we get his point of view as he stalks the two before walking away to set up random traps everywhere. He goes to the shed, looks around, and then notices a book. The butcher picks it up but quickly pushes it back down. He begins building a head brace. The POV shifts back to Mark and Amy. Realizing the situation, Amy calls the radio station a couple of blocks away and gets in touch with the camp watcher. The camp watcher answers, "Hello, who is it?" Amy responds, "This is Amy. I saw someone in the woods. I don't know who it is, but they were just watching me and Mark. Can you take a look around at your station?" The camp watcher replies, "Yes, I can do that." He walks downstairs and leaves his cell tower. In the middle of the woods, he sees the butcher's shed. "What? Whose shed is that? I haven't seen that before," he thinks to himself. He walks closer to the shed, enters, and looks around. Inside, he sees the horrifying head brace that the butcher built. "What the fuck? What is this?" he exclaims, looking around. He finds hooks covered in blood and discovers a freezer. He opens it, and a dead body falls out, causing him to stumble backward, breathing heavily. It turns out to be one of the 10 missing people from the lake. Terrified, he runs back to the cell tower. Once there, he looks over the deck and sees the butcher walking back toward a shed. The camp watcher is filled with dread. He radios Amy to report what he found. "Amy, can you hear me?" he says into the radio. She answers, "Yes, I'm here." He relays the news, and Amy is terrified, breathing heavily. She warns everyone to stay inside the cabins. A couple of days pass, and on day 5, the whole group is contemplating whether to go back outside. Amy tells the others that she can't venture out because there's a man out there who will kill her instantly. "Remember the radio?" she adds. "We need to contact the sheriff, but there are 2 radio stations, one for him and the other one for communicating with the campers. The camp watcher can't help us because he's at his own radio station." Amy remembers and asserts, "We are staying here for a while, but we need to find weapons." "Where are we going to find weapons?" Mark asks. He then recounts what he witnessed earlier, shocking the group. "Wait, where are James and Sarah?" Mark suddenly realizes, oh shit, they're on the path. Everyone panics and rushes outside to find them, but it's already too late. POV, James and Sarah, both have been stalked by the butcher. James steps into a bear trap, screaming in agony, triggering a log trap that crushes his head between 2 logs, turning it into a meat pancake. Sarah steps back in horror but falls into a snare trap, lifting her into the air. The branch breaks, sending her crashing onto another bear trap. Though injured, she manages to get up and run, only to run straight into the butcher, who kills her. Meanwhile, the whole group races towards the path, but they are already too late. They turn back to the cabin. Amy realizes that Dave and Robert went out to the lake to fish and swim. They decide to go after them. At the lake, they see Dave laughing and having fun while swimming, but suddenly, he gets pulled under the water. The water starts turning blood red. They run back and see Dave's lifeless body floating to the surface. The whole group splits up to search each cabin. Amy, Mark, and Luke head to a cabin where they can contact the sheriff. Once they arrive, they realize they need to find batteries, and all of them are exhausted after running, so they decide to take naps. End Ash. Act 3. Everyone is at the Shepherd cabins except for Amy, Mark, and Luke, who are contemplating their next move. They all eventually fall asleep. On day 7, it's night time, and an eerie silence fills the air, broken only by the distant sound of foghorns. Amy grabs her walkie-talkie and tries to contact the camp watcher. "Hello," the camp watcher answers. "Yes, Amy here. We need to get to the house. Can you tell us where we can contact the sheriff?" "William," the camp watcher responds, "Okay, I think that cell tower is a couple of blocks away from me. I can't go because I saw that freak again. I couldn't get any sleep last night." Amy reads the directions as the group walks off into the forest, following the path. Meanwhile, the camp watcher notices the butcher and tells the group to stop moving and hide. He's moving through the brush like nothing. He says, "This is not normal. Humans have a hard time going through this brush. I literally hurt myself while going through that brush." Amy replies, "He's probably not human. He must have inhuman strength." The camp watcher suggests, "You watch way too many superhero movies." Amy chuckles. "Yeah, you're right, but that's kind of unnatural. He's not even using a machete to get through it. He's just walking right through it." "Have you seen his face?" Amy asks. "I couldn't. It was covered in blood, not like some handprints on the mask, but just blood," the camp watcher explains. Suddenly, the camp watcher becomes aware of the butcher stalking the tower. He backs up and runs into a wire trap, falling over and hitting his jaw against the ground, breaking it. Injured, the butcher approaches and crushes his head with his boot. Meanwhile, Amy wonders why he is screaming. She looks up and sees the butcher looming over her. Terrified, the group runs toward the tower, using the map, but they are unaware that Luke has been knocked out and kidnapped. POV, Luke wakes up in a part of the forest he doesn't recognize, wearing a head brace. He starts running around in horror, screaming for help until he steps into a bear trap. Unable to crawl away because it is embedded in the ground, the head brace activates and slowly descends toward his head. The bear trap makes contact with the top of his head, ending his life. Back with Amy and Mark, they continue running until they encounter Robert. They see a figure in the distance, and it turns out to be a survivor. They start talking and eventually make their way to the radio station. Once there, they turn on the radio and manage to contact the sheriff. After a brief conversation, they sleep for the night. When they call the sheriff again, he tells them he can't come to get them right away because of something he has to do. When they wake up, it is close to dark. The group returns to the base and heads back to the cabins. "Where's Robert?" Amy asks. "Robert ran in a separate direction to find weapons," Mark replies. "I hope he's okay." As they get back to the cabins, they find Ryan still in bed, wondering where everyone went. Amy helps him up and gets him out the door. They sit on the front porch. POV, Robert. It's now nighttime, around 8 p.m. Robert crawls out from under his bed, remembering the weapons he needs to find. Suddenly, he hears something moving on the porch and quickly hides under the bed. The butcher walks in, searching for him, but after 10 minutes, he eventually leaves. Once the butcher is gone, Robert gets out from under the bed, only to be pulled back under and brutally killed. His legs cut off and his jaw ripped off against his own skull. POV, Mark. Mark is running through the forest and manages to reach the campsite, where he meets up with Amy and Ryan. They stand together and see the unknown survivor, now known as Rick. Rick says, "Wait. We need to get weapons. I think there's some inside." He pulls out a few weapons and continues, "Before we use these weapons, I think the gun might stop him. The weird guy has been stalking us. I don't know his name, but I called him the man from the woods. He's not here right now, though." Suddenly, they hear police sirens in the distance. Act 4. The sheriff arrives but finds himself at the wrong cabin. Sheriff William marks through the pathways, instructing his deputies to be exact as they split up. POV, Deputy 1. While walking through the forest, he gets jumped by the butcher and is brutally murdered with the butcher's bare hands. POV, Deputy 2. As he walks through the woods, he triggers a tree trap and is killed instantly. POV, Remaining survivors. The remaining survivors sit and see a head roll in front of them. It's the head of Deputy 1. The butcher throws the head to the ground. Rick grabs his weapon and prepares to fight the butcher. The two exchange blows, but the butcher overpowers Rick, grabbing him by the throat and crushing his windpipe. The butcher then walks towards Amy and Ryan. Suddenly, Mark comes out of nowhere and hits the butcher with a pitchfork, stunning him momentarily. Mark pulls out a weapon, and they both fight, but the butcher is too strong. He grabs Mark and, in a brutal act, kills him. The sheriff arrives just in time to shoot the butcher, dropping Mark to the ground. The sheriff fires repeatedly until the butcher charges at him and grabs his gun. They struggle until the butcher overpowers the sheriff, aiming the gun at his head and blowing his brains out. Mark stands up, throws weapons to the others, and all three fight the butcher. The butcher tries to hit Mark, but Mark dodges. The butcher manages to hit Mark, throwing him to the ground. Hurt, Mark stands up and stabs the butcher in the knees. Enraged, the butcher retaliates, hitting Amy and grabbing Mark, attempting to kill him. Just then, Ryan shoots the butcher in the head, firing repeatedly, but the gun is little effect. The butcher tries to kill Ryan until Mark stabs him in the belly with the pitchfork. Furious, the butcher tries to kill Mark again, but Amy pulls out a wooden plank and strikes the butcher in the face. knocking him out and nearly dislocating his jaw. The butcher falls to the ground. Mark runs toward the road but gets hit by a car, surviving but getting knocked out. Paramedics arrive and place Mark on a stretcher, loading him into the ambulance. They drive away, unaware that the butcher appears behind them, chasing after the vehicle. As they speed down the road, they see police officers and get out of the car. One of the officers gets picked up by the butcher and is brutally murdered. The other officer tries to shoot the butcher, but his head is severed from his body in the struggle. The remaining camp counselors find a motorcycle that had been left behind and jump on it to escape. However, the butcher decapitates Amy, causing the motorcycle to crash. Ryan is thrown off, and the motorcycle explodes. 10 years later, Ryan wakes up from a coma, finding Mark right beside him. "Hey, you're finally awake," Mark says. "Oh, don't mind me, I'm in a full body cast." "Where's Amy?" Ryan looks solemn. "She's dead." Post-credit scene. 10 years in the past, after Ryan was taken to the hospital, the butcher is seen sewing his jaw back on, reattaching it. He looks toward the camera with his mask off, revealing his face. Behind him, a TV broadcasts the story, detailing the number of kills that occurred at the camp. 12 victims.